Okay, so this is my review of The Undoing episode 4, See No Evil. As always, this is directed by Suzanne Bier and written by David E. Kelly. And as always with my reviews, for this show in particular, no book spoilers please anywhere. I know they said it's going to be very different from the book, but I just don't want that mentioned here. Let's keep that all somewhere else and enjoy this just as a show and what we can kind of theorize and see what comes about without worrying about what the book said. So there's a couple big things this episode developed, and it centers on really learning about two characters. And those two characters are Haley Fitzgerald, the lawyer, and Franklin, Grace's father, played by Donald Sutherland. Basically, the popular three suspects here is I'm on Team Grace, clearly, that she did this murder. A lot of people still think Jonathan, and there's a good faction that actually believe it was Franklin. And to that party that believe it was Franklin, this episode really kind of pushes it a little bit in your favor now. And while we'll go into how that happens and how it shows that it might have been him, there's also some other big developments in this episode, just with character development and really making a point of the power of Jonathan's charm and, like Haley says, that he's mesmerizing to everybody he's ever known. And how Grace here is the ghost chaser, which we'll get into. And how from the beginning that Franklin didn't like Jonathan and that he saw through his deceitful ways because he saw it from someone who reminds him of himself. So starting from the top of this episode, going into learning about Haley Fitzgerald now, played brilliantly by Noma Dumezweni, known for playing actually Hermione in Harry Potter Cursed Child Broadway play. She's now taking this role of someone who's also really good at reading people and reading through Jonathan, reading through Grace. And what I like is that she gives her character a tick, and it's always makes it more interesting when you have a character that you could just go a normal route in portraying them, but there's something that makes them kind of special and stand out. And I think I really liked about the writing with her character here and the betrayal is just her saying that line twice in this episode. She's like, I'm not funny. So everything she's saying, you're getting straightforward. She's not making jokes. She's not making quips. She's just telling you like it is. You see that when she suggests to Grace, perhaps you killed him. And you also see that when she's talking to Jonathan later on, suggesting other affairs. And you see Haley's got to read on this whole family involved with this case because she's kind of getting into this idea about them being obviously rich and thinking they can get away with anything and why they can withhold information. And she wants to get to the bottom of helping Jonathan and Grace and is like, look, I can only help you if you cannot hide things from me. Because they're both still not being totally truthful with her. And that's what any good lawyer wants because, again, if they get any surprises in court, that's when you usually lose a case. You got to be prepared. And you'll see we learn a lot about Jonathan here because it wasn't just one affair. He says it was another affair, but this one was out of him being in a bad state of mind. And you see Haley sees that as the opportunity to kind of go for the angle that, well, this one was the one out of a bad state of mind, but you didn't say that about Elena. So it gets that idea rolling about Jonathan using the angle of Elena actually have been in love with her to kind of make him look also more innocent. And he's definitely done more affairs than just other one. He's definitely a serial cheater. They've given us so many hints of that, but you can just tell in this scene that he's guilty of that part of it. And it connects beautifully to when we learn about Franklin later on, his big reveal that he cheated on Grace's mom. And he said it was over and over and over and constant. And him saying he sees Jonathan that way, I think that's just confirming it's the same breed of man here. Now, the only thing I didn't like about this episode was there's a scene here where Grace goes to see Badger again. It literally is a rehash of the scene we already saw earlier in the season where Badger says he thinks Jonathan is a jerk, but he's no murderer. Same lines. I don't get the point of this. I don't think you need to show us Grace going back to him because the audience already knows this information about Badger's belief on Jonathan, so I don't know why they rehashed that here. That felt kind of silly to throw in there. So what makes it look really bad for Franklin now that he could be a suspect in our eyes is that there are two scenes that make him terrifying here. The first is when he goes to tell Jonathan he's going to be the one bailing him out, that he's only doing it for the sake of Grace because Grace never asked him for help. But he goes all Liam Neeson and Taken here, saying, if you screw over my grandson and my daughter again, I will kill you myself. But that's super important because you're already learning about his character that he will do anything to protect his family at all costs. And that second scene I'm talking about where he's terrifying is when he goes to the school principal and tells him he can't kick Henry out, which I totally agree with, by the way. Pretty rough on the school to kick out the son just because he's related to the family who's in all this media buzz. But they show this extreme close-up of him, and he's like, you speak of ugliness. You have not met ugliness yet. So it's, again, a terrifying close-up, and it's interesting because no matter what the case may be and the answer of this crime is that it's great the show's adding this other suspect in your mind now and putting this light on Franklin that he's a scary dude and he's capable clearly of murder and of anything, again, to protect his family. So in that case of thinking that it was Franklin, his motive possibly would be that he found out about the affair now, and he's always had suspicions of Jonathan, but knew about Elena and was protecting Grace from getting hurt and actually killed Elena. And that could lead to maybe why Jonathan's big reveal is that he might think Franklin did it. We'll see, though. And there's some really good writing here that ties to things set up in season 1, which I love, but Franklin's saying to Grace that from the moment he met Jonathan, he had bad vibes. And him calling out Grace saying, like, you explained what the perfect guy was to you, to him, and you made in your mind that he was that person who he really wasn't. And this goes back to Grace projecting on her client in episode 1, having that same issue where she makes checks and balances everything in her life, but she can kind of put a blind eye to her husband because she wants it to be the man he really isn't. And now we see she's guilty of that as well with Jonathan. And they beautifully explain why Franklin would be paranoid now that she's going to fall back for him, and she snaps at this, right? But you see in episodes in this scene, Jonathan's trying to use that sad puppy face to her twice. When they're walking outside together, he wants her to kiss her, and he's kind of pushy about it, and she doesn't want to fall for it, but she obviously is getting sucked in by him. And it's the same scene where she's in the hospital bed with him, and he's treating her like one of his sick patients. He puts on that likable charm that would suck anybody in. And now with the detective showing back up to Grace, we get, again, this important thing where they show extreme close-up on her eyes when she goes to me in psycho mode. I still think Grace did it. I'm still convinced of that, and that maybe she's got this kind of crazy blood from her father, but she's still the one who did this. And that her seeing this painting she learns about that Elena did of her, they suggest it might have been her there, that she took a portrait of her. And what's interesting later on is when Grace is having this montage of thought about Elena, which she's had a bunch, which makes me think she still did it, that there's one that's from the perspective of Elena looking at her while she's painting her. Maybe, again, she's just imagining this, but I also think if I'm going the case that Grace did this, that all the stuff's clicking to her now on what happened, that she was able to bury it, but slowly the pieces are coming back to her and what she did and what led to it. And this would lead more into why she had this panic attack. Yes, some of it was that she had the sense someone was following her, and also because, again, she's getting all these thoughts about Elena and what's really happening, and I believe what she did. But I love even in this scene when Grace just has this panic attack, Susanne Bier has been shooting the show like a horror film, which I think really works effectively. And what I mean by that, especially in the scene, is how she does, again, a lot of close-ups, but also a lot of shots where the background's out of focus and it's eerie, and she lets that camera move wild. And I love even the overhead shot with the snow falling into her hand. I think it's really good, and I like that it's confident directing here. And I think this show needs that to lift it up from feeling boring. And I think it does it effectively. And it effectively gets you in this mindset of these characters in these crazy situations, especially Grace. And when I'm talking about horror directing-esque too, is just even how she shoots Jonathan, in particular when he's going to Fernando's place and he's in the shadows and the reflection. We also see this in the beginning, in the intro of the show, when we see little Grace. There's a reflection that could be her. It's a shadowy child figure. It could be Franklin, who knows? But she likes that shot too, so I wonder what she's hinting at with that. And what's important in this scene with Jonathan talking to Fernando is when he says, "You need to stay away from my wife." Now, obviously, on the surface, we're to take that as, yes, stop stalking her and following her, Fernando. And that's what he's saying. But what that could also mean is him basically warning Fernando about how dangerous his wife might be if he knows something and thinks it was her. And you have to understand, Fernando here eventually eases up to Jonathan here, even lets him hold the baby. So Fernando, we know now, is kind of going away from suspecting it was Jonathan, shown by him not following Jonathan, but he's following Grace. So something is up there, that might be the whole twist in this case that is going to give also Jonathan an out here and help him in trial if Fernando thinks it wasn't him. And again, there's still that moment last episode where we know Franklin looked at Fernando and the kid late at night. So there was a conversation we didn't see, or something's up there. So we see, though, Haley freaks out on Jonathan because he went and tampered with a witness, which is just a horrible move. But she now sees that maybe this guy, her client, Jonathan, is so good at mesmerizing and his charm that he is unstoppable with it. And then she's like, you know what? We'll use this to our advantage, and sets up this big TV interview for him. And before we even get to that big interview, it's interesting because when Franklin reveals this to Grace about how he was deceitful to her mom, it's heartbreaking for Grace, and Nicole Kidman obviously sells this amazing on her face, but this is her now being told the two men closest to her in life both deceived her. And she's finding these out very close to each other, which is super traumatic. And it also goes into these themes about like when you marry someone who's like your father or your mother, that there's some subconscious stuff going on, maybe why she chose Jonathan and was attracted to him, that he did subconsciously remind her of her father. And again, I'm saying Grace is the ghost chaser because you see Franklin calls her out and says, you chase ghosts. Like, again, you think these people are who they're really not, and you know that, and you're still going for them, and why he believes she's fallen for him again. She's like, how weak do you think I am? But it's interesting because she clearly is a little bit here falling for Jonathan again and getting entranced by him, but we'll see where that goes with Grace. Because she claims in this episode her head is stronger than her heart. So this big exciting scene at the end here is him on TV, Jonathan. He puts on the sad puppy face, and you see this planned out card they had with Haley that he would lean into his love for Elena and that he lost someone he loved here. Kind of giving him this victim image now to the public. And you see this angers Grace while she's watching this. And you see he leans in now. He admits he probably triggered who the killer was because of the affair. So it's got to lead to him saying he thinks it's Franklin or Grace. But what complicates that is that still Haley was hired by Grace here and is part of this team with Franklin. But it's like maybe when the interviewer pins Jonathan to say, do you think you know who did this? And Jonathan says, yeah, I do. That maybe that was off the cuff and Jonathan wasn't supposed to do that on Haley's advice. So we'll see. So maybe he will say Franklin or Grace, but I'm not so sure. But he also said in this interview that, oh, maybe this killer's motive was seeing this affair, and he says it as a he. So that could be Franklin. But I'm going to add one more person this could be, and that's Henry. It's a long shot, but Henry, they keep showing him observing everybody in this case. And there might be a moment where the child snaps and admits to it if he did do this, and that maybe he did know something was going on and he did know Miguel. I'm not sure. This is a stretch, but that could also be something going on because they've really given Henry a lot of scenes where he's just observing everything, and there's got to be a reason for that because we don't really know what Henry's end game here is in the game, in this whole show, and why he's really important. So let's not count him out either. But this is a crazy cliffhanger. It makes you really excited for next week. I'm really digging this show. Again, I'm so frustrated because if you even look at the Rotten Tomatoes scores people gave before the season, there's a lot of critics who said it was boring and wasn't interesting and just falls flat. And I'm like, what show are you watching? Because to me, the writing's so consistent, the acting's great, and there's constantly a mystery and more twists than I thought, because even when I still believe it's Grace who did this and thought I figured it all out, I'm having my doubts, and there's so many ways this can go. So I don't see what people are complaining about here. I'm giving this episode a 9.6. I'm really loving the show, and I'm so excited to see how these final 2 episodes play out. Let me know down below what you thought of the episode, and let me know who you think did this, what team you're on of who did this murder. I'd love to hear your thoughts and reasons why. Please make sure to follow me at Steve Varley Show so you don't miss one of my reviews of The Undoing. I also do movie reviews and celebrity interviews as well. And I ask for a $2 monthly donation if you love this channel so I can do more reviews for you guys and videos, because I do work a full-time job and I'd love to make this full-time so I can give you guys more content. That would be super awesome of you if you could. The link is down below in my description. If not, I totally get it. And please just make sure also to subscribe to the channel. That helps so many ways. You have no idea. And like I said, don't be afraid to share your thoughts about this show in general. And I'll see you next time.